An exciting tournament, and the most exciting story, of course, has been the streak of none other than the world champion, Mr. Magnus Carlsen. But it's not just about the lead, it's also about the question, can he win 7 in a row? This is a feat that was accomplished recently by arguably his closest rival, Mr. Ivanchuk-Carlsen, the number 2 player in the world, not in this tournament, but in the Sinquefield Cup in 2014, position in the world. So let's have a look if Magnus accomplished the same thing. Magnus playing with the black pieces today against Vasily Ivanchuk, the Ukrainian genius who can be very up and down. Vasily had a great start to this tournament, was in the lead for quite a while, but has won d4. And Carlsen replies with knight to f6. He experimented with g6 and d6 in the first rounds of the tournament. Did not go very well for him. So today he goes for a more classical setup. Knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight to c3. And the line in this position amongst the world top players. The status changes all the time. It used to be c6, the semi-Slav. Then at some point it became bishop e7. And nowadays bishop b4 is what everybody plays. Guys who have followed the tournament might recall that this is the move that was played by Ivan Aronian against Magnus Carlsen. Today he tries his hand at playing the black side of it, something he has done before as well. Ivanchuk plays bishop g5, arguably the most solid move. There's a lot of subtleties here about timing, when you should go cd, ed in bishop g5, and what the difference is by starting with bishop g5 to the Vienna is called after e4. But it's nothing Carlsen has in mind here. He plays the move h6, which already kind of shows his game plan. He's not going to go too crazy. He's going to play a theoretical main line. He's going to be solid, and he's not going to go all out for his 7 out of 7 streak. But his priority is to play a good game and win this tournament. Statement is accurate. Let me look it up for a second. This is the score after 9 rounds. Before this game, Magnus Carlsen on 7 out of 9. He started with 1 out of 3, then won the next 6. That makes 7. And so it's not a lock that he's going to win yet, and therefore not a big surprise. He plays solidly today. Queen takes f6, e3, and castles. This bishop takes f6 is a typical device. We've seen this in many games, even analyzed by myself here, where you win some time for developing and misplacing the black queen on the f6 square. All of this highly theoretical. And Ivanchuk plays the move rook c1, the main move in this position. D takes c, bishop takes c4, c5. All of this is theory and has been seen in this very tournament, in an exciting game actually. Wesley So fun. Castle, c takes d4. Players are still following that game. And in this position, the main move and the attempt to gain an advantage nowadays is the move knight to e4. This aims to keep as many pieces as possible on the board. And after queen e7, knight takes d4. We've seen some exciting fights. I believe Levan Aronian beat Vishy Anand from this position. Looks innocent because the pawn structure is symmetrical, but things can become very, very complicated here. Bishop d7, queen h5, knight c6, knight to b3. This is a theoretical line where white is trying to cut off the bishop on b4, which looks a little misplaced now. Only well prepared to play this line with black. However, Ivanchuk does something that white can do in almost all the major openings, which is to play very, very solidly. He goes for the move knight takes d4, keeping the same structure but not committing this knight to e4, develop your queenside pieces. The most sensible and actually very typical and worth remembering approach is the one Carlsen uses in this game. He goes bishop d7. The idea is to prepare knight c6 and then, if white takes on c6, to recapture with the bishop. This tends to solve black's problems. The problem is it doesn't solve his problems if he's playing for a win. He uses his lead in development to kind of force black to either give up this bishop or end up being in trouble. And Carlsen here has to play one sequence that is very accurate but leads to forced simplifications. Nothing new here. This is all well known game, and it has been played a couple of times. Black has only one sequence here to equalize the game, which of course Carlsen plays. He doesn't have a choice. He goes knight to c6. It's important to start with this move. And after knight takes c6, now he takes the bishop on the knight on c3 with his bishop. Rook takes c3. This is played in the game. Bishop takes c6, and we can already see symmetrical. And the remaining pieces cancel each other out. Ivanchuk wastes no time in exchanging further pieces or offering a move repetition. So the game ends. Bishop b5, bishop d5, bishop c4. Carlsen is nothing better than going back. Bishop c6, bishop b5, bishop d5, bishop c4. First of all, Magnus Carlsen is not gonna even Fabiano-Caruana's streak. His winning streak ends at 6 games, which is still not terrible. Therefore, here we got these beautiful jerseys. It does stay 6. And it also means Magnus Carlsen is not about streak. It is a good result for him. Ivanchuk stays 1.5 points behind him. And he stays in the lead comfortably. Now, I'm not sure. There will be talk like, is Ivanchuk morally obliged to play for a win with the white pieces? I don't think he is. But of course, the more you entered to the top tournaments, and that's kind of a decision every top player has to take for himself, how often you decide to take days off. It's, from a sporting perspective, very understandable if you're dealing with a Magnus Carlsen who's won 6 games in a row to try to force a draw with white, and he did succeed in this case. I don't think Magnus Carlsen minds that much from a tournament or equalizing Mr. Fabiano-Caruana's streak. Let's see if we have another important picture on the topic. Oh, guess what we do? Magnus Carlsen, the Magnificent 6 for Caruana. We did the Fabnificent 7. Still, having talked that much about Mr. Fabiano-Caruana, I decided we should make his game the second feature of today's show. If you guys don't mind, let's have a look at the game. Baldur Jobava against Fabiano-Caruana. Jobava preferential treatment, but it's not a personal thing, even though I think he's a funny guy. It's just his games are so entertaining. One should really cover it every day. The tournament has not gone all that well for him. If we look at the scoreboard once again, Baldur Jobava has only 1.5 points. Fabiano-Caruana, his opponent for today, is also not going to be all that happy. He has 5 out of 9, but he's 2 points behind Magnus Carlsen. He's not really fighting for tournament victory. He started with 2 out of 2, and we were speaking of another Caruana streak, but Magnus Carlsen did steal his. They did play an exciting game, as it tends to happen when you have Baldur Jobava involved. Let's have a look. d4, knight to f6, and knight to c3. Magnus Carlsen, who gave a great press conference, by the way, I highly recommend watching that, called this setup the Jobava to f4 or to b2, get his queen to d2 and castle queenside, which I really struggle to believe that it's any good, but it's a setup Jobava is very fond of, and he uses different variations of it. If you guys have seen his bishop b2, knight f6, now he went knight c3, bishop g7, d4, and once again, he got his knight to c3, he developed his bishop, and he wanted to get this in, which is not the way I would recommend playing, but Jobava is a creative guy, and he kind of learned and then starting to play very seriously indeed. Caruana goes for the solid e6, e3, and bishop to b4, interesting move. More normal in this position is bishop e7, followed by short castles. However, bishop b4, I'm almost certain that Caruana was ready for this line. He is very well prepared, and Jobava has used the set to e2. I'm getting a sign here that people do not believe that we're live. I'm not sure what that means. I'm supposed to mention it. This is live and direct. That's why the show is a lot worse than usual. Normally I would be cutting like 80 times and I would redo it after I didn't play that video from Ivanchuk-Carlsen. But this, you better believe it. I'm not sure how that would have convinced anybody. Anyway, knight e2, weird move, I don't understand it. Bishop d3 looks a lot more logical to my mind, because you develop the bishop and then you develop the knight and then you can castle. But Jobava, he likes being creative. Allow bishop takes c3, but I have a hard time believing this would have been a threat here. B takes c3, and it looks to me like white is doing pretty well. So knight e2, castles, and now of course black has already completed his king's development. e6, g3, preparing to go bishop g2 and castles, but it all does look a little artificial. Black has very easy development, while this setup with the white pieces now with the knight on e2 fails to convince me. b6, very logical move, bishop g2, bishop b7. Cover. Another thing that always bothers me about having this knight on c3, it stops white from going c4. Well, black has committed no such crime, and he can continue with c5 as he does, when I would already slightly prefer the black position. This is the price Jobava pays, especially against the world's of unexplored situations, that he ends up worse out of the opening, even with white quite a bit. Rook to e1, another move you could argue about. Could have been better to exchange bishops immediately. Bishop takes, queen takes, and now play rook e1, for example, when nothing too bad has happened. Because after rook e1, Caruana plays exactly what we learned in school, to first go bishop b4, then bishop d6, and then bishop to e7, but he's playing against his bishop on f4, which is a bit closed in by his own pawns. Oops, wrong square. And it is in danger of being, at the very least, exchanged for a knight if black manages to go knight to h. I don't want to give up the two bishops for nothing in this position, and Jobava takes measures to stop that, to fight against knight h5, which is not a big threat yet, but it will become one after knight c6. However, this also compromises his position. He goes h3, and no prizes for guessing his next move after knight c6. He plays g4. The downside is he did weaken his king side, so he's worse. Rook c8, queen d2, a6. Black has reasonably straightforward play. He can consider the idea of going knight a5, knight c4, and for now a6 is by himself. Pretty comfortable stuff for Fabiano-Caruana, who is the world number 2 after all. D takes c5, b takes c5. This is already a serious concession, and it shows that Jobava was not very happy with his position. If you have to go d takes c5, exchanging this beautiful b takes c, rook a d1, queen to a5, also made possible by this move. Knight to c1, planning to jump, but Caruana stops that with the move c4, when the knight has nothing better to do than to return to e2. Rook fd8. Caruana, note that he's not doing anything all that special. He won the opening battle against Bardur Jobava, who's struggling to stay in the game because he lacks control of the center and has weakened his king. Knight d4, queen b6, queen to c1, defending the b2 pawn, and the black decides to improve his knight from f6, puts it on bishop on the long diagonal, planning to put it on f6. So Caruana keeps playing well. However, the one fault Fabiano-Caruana has been having throughout his Wijk aan Zee 2015 campaign really has been that he's playing too slowly. He ends up in time trouble pretty much every game. We recall his amazing run from St. Louis, where he did score the 7 out of 7. One of his big recipes was that he was playing quickly and confidently. Of course, you can't force this all the time, and it also helped there that he got his preparation on the board quite a lot. But it seems like the captain behind Fabiano-Caruana probably has to speed up to regain his full mojo. However, his position is pretty good, and Jobava pushes his kingside pawns here, trying to create some play over there. This is, with all the criticism thrown at Jobava, one has to say he's incredibly creative and resilient also in worse position. He's not easily why I do enjoy covering them so much. g5, h4, also not something you see every day. g6, Caruana decides to put his bishop on g7 to improve it from there. h5, bishop to g7, h takes g, knight to f3. And we can see Jobava has a plan, f6 and the h6 square, and then tried to checkmate the black king. The reason I still think black has a good position is, first of all, black still has central control, which tends to be a pretty good insurance against being checkmated on a board so full of pieces. And also the white queen. In order to have a serious attack, the queen would accomplish as long as it's stuck on the c1 square. So let's see how the game proceeded. Really, I am trying to make it to the time trouble phase here, where things will heat up. Knight c5, knight h2. Caruana plays the, once again, very logical, but also very committal move, e5. This is a big decision, because e5 changes the dynamic of the position quite a bit. Not sure how to explain it. He blocks his bishop from g7 and can no longer capture on c3. And maybe most importantly, he loses control of the e5 square for a second. He could have used it, this is a move I really like, to just play knight to e5 as well. Stop when it looks to me like black is quite seriously better here. There seems to be nothing better for white than taking on e5, takes, knight g4, and retreating by going bishop g7 back, when I can't see any way to make progress with white, and I believe that black has a state, but you can take and then go knight d7, try to pick up the pawn. I don't like it, but Caruana goes e5 instead, which really presses fast forward on the game. Bishop to g3, knight to e7, that was his idea. He covers d5, and he also wants to put his knight on f5. A committal move, changing the pawn structure again. Not sure I like this one either. There's a lot to be said for going queen e6 here. Once again, maintaining your center as it is to keep the option of d4. I'm assuming he did not like the move bishop h3 when this knight to f5. White still suffers from his queen being far from the action. Knight g4, e4, f4. Not sure I like f4, but it's very difficult for f5, asking this bishop some serious questions. Let's think of an example. Let's say rook to e2, knight goes to f5, bishop to f4, and this knight jumps into h4, and all of a sudden it turns out that it could be white who runs into trouble on the queen side, because his pawn 6 doesn't look good. So Jobava goes f4, move I'm sure he did not happily play, in order to create a square on f2 for his bishop and to consolidate his pawn chain. Caruana decides not to take, which you could argue about. He goes knight, black with white with two isolated pawns. Bishop takes f3, knight to f5, and once again black has to be better. Black has to be better all the way out of the opening. Still, the game is far from over. Knight f5, bishop f2, rook to b8, keeping an eye on the b2 square, rook to d, queen back to c6, and notice this, bishop g2 back, queen e6 back. Jobava avoids a move repetition here. I don't think Caruana really wanted to repeat moves and make a draw. I think he was trying to gain some time by repeating. He says, nah, I don't want to give you the chance to repeat the position by playing bishop h3. I want to keep playing. I'll play the move rook ed1. Which goes to show why he is such a crowd favorite, even though he's having a hard time in this tournament. He is a natural born fighter and a big optimist. Nothing people say about me, by the way. Not quite sure why. Knight, when he played his last move, rook ed1, obviously, bishop h3, which he played earlier, was stopping that because the bishop from h3 covers the g4 knight. Knight h4. Now, white can't really take on h4 because that runs into queen takes g4 when there is serious. Black goes d4, e takes d4. e3 looks like it's winning on the spot, but it turns out it's not, because after bishop e3, this rook still covers the g2 bishop and stops black from checkmating here. But instead of e3, black just goes knight to e6, and this is actually winning on the spot. Knight takes f4, 3 is in the air as well. There is no defense for white. The best he can do is bishop e3, knight takes f4, bishop takes f4, queen takes f4, and his position is lost. g5 is falling, d4 is weak, e3 is threatened. Just a hopeless situation. So Jobava had to go bishop to h3 in this position on f3. Knight f3, king g2, and I believe we do have video footage of this exchange if I can find it. Let's see. Is this it? This is me guessing. No, this is not it. This is the video I wanted to show you earlier. Anyway, this is frustrating. Here we go. Here we got Caruana with the black pieces against Jobava. He's weighing his options. Unfortunately, we have those flags in the way. Knight f3 check, king g2, queen to d6, rook takes d5. A bit desperate. Instead, rook e2 might look like it's keeping more chances in the position, but the black, they can't really move anywhere. They're all dominated by the black knight when it's hard to suggest a good move for white after, let's say, queen to c6, toying with the idea of going d4. Things are just hopeless. Look at this queen. Can't do anywhere. Can't go anywhere. The move suggested by the computer is the move queen to a1, believe it. He decided to take on d5 with the rook, give up in exchange. Rook takes, bishop takes, rook takes, queen to b6. And Jobava wouldn't be Jobava if he would not sacrifice a second exchange in this very position with rook takes. Finally, the situation where we do have our video footage. Rook takes c5, queen takes c5. Hardly anything to be seen on the board. What can be seen is both players are in time trouble and are extremely focused, arguably a little bit nervous, but that's what time trouble does to you. There we got Jobava not moving a muscle. So focused. It does not look, however, like he is unhappy with the situation. He's just concentrating, and he goes knight takes e4. It's Caruana's move, who's also very short on time, and his queen is attacked. He puts it on c6. Knight takes e4 and queen to c6. And all of a sudden, it looks like white has done very well because he has given up 2 exchanges, but he could just take this knight on f3 when he would have a lot of 4 minor pieces against only 1 black minor piece. However, the problem is this knight on e4 cannot be maintained. Black goes rook to e8, attacking on e4 and pretty much winning on the spot because this knight is lost. Knight f6 check, bishop takes f6. Also does not help because just bishop e5, f takes e5, rook takes e5 is coming. With a winning position, can't do that. So Jobava still finds himself in real big trouble here. Queen c6, he tries knight. Now he has 2 exchanges down, which means black has 2 rooks, white has 2 minor pieces to show for them. However, white has a couple of pawns. The black king could end up being slightly open, and white has my favorite tool, the 2 bishops. So the position is not very clear yet. Bishop g4, indirectly covering this pawn because now knight takes e4 is met with bishop f3. Winning by pinning. Instead, after bishop g4, Caruana tried the move c3, trying to open the position for his rooks and activating his queen. Jobava tries to keep her. Rook to d6, interesting decision, acknowledging how annoying this knight on f6 is and openly sending the message, you know what, I want to take that knight. I want to go rook takes f6 and only be 1 exchange up, but not having to deal with this advanced horse seat. Not planning to take it yet, apparently. Queen to h1. Don't ask me why he did not go queen to h1 immediately. Probably now rook takes f6 is a problem. And actually, this is very tricky stuff by Jobava. In a second why the rook is worse off on d8. So actually do ask me why I didn't do it. Because I know queen e1, rook bd8, queen h1. Now threatening checkmate on h6. Therefore, black's hand is forced with rook takes f6. 6. And here we will see the difference between having the rook on d8 and having the rook on b8. Black has to take this pawn because he does not want to get checkmated with queen g7. And queen takes e4 would not really help that. White just goes king g1 and black will run out of checks and be checkmated on g7 fairly quickly. So he has to take on f. White has managed to win both his exchanges back. First one due to the sheer strength of the knight on f6. The second one due to this bishop fork. It's called a fork? Skewer. I think skewer is the correct word. Attacking the queen and the rook on d8 position is equal, and Caruana probably he should not have gone for the move rook bd8, but instead have taken on f6 immediately, not allowing any of this trickery. So in the game, after bishop h4, queen to d4 was played. Bishop takes d8, and Caruana does view that white has some chances after f5, even though I believe this position is still drawn. Instead, Caruana takes on e4. He's not really risking anything by doing so. He is keeping a perpetual in hand, and he gives Jobava the chance to... I'm not sure. Jobava is always in great spirits, but this is one that will probably keep him awake tonight, where he does give the draw away, which he... I'm not sure if deserved, but he had a chance to keep it after fighting his way back into the game. He was much worse after time trouble. He made this great comeback, and now he gives it all away by playing king g3. The correct move was king to f2. Jobava probably neglected this because now black can play queen d4 check and pick his bishop on d8 up, but queen takes d8. And the cute little trick, bishop e6. Maybe he missed something here. But even if you don't see this, you had to go for this line because it was the only chance. After f takes e6, queen takes g6. White has a perpetual. There's no way black could escape all the checks. Instant queen d4 check, not allowing white to regain his material. But the problem is, it is losing the king, which is the most important piece. I'm not quite sure what he missed. Queen e1 check, and the king can't go to the h-file. King h3 obviously runs into queen. Very cute checkmate after king g3, knight e4 checkmate. While king g2 played in the game does not help either. Black goes queen f1 check. King g3, once again no good because of knight e4 check. And no matter where the king goes, it will be checkmate in 3 moves, I believe. So Jobava check, and let's see if we have video footage yet again of this final situation. Here queen f2 check, king to h1 is played. These flags are a bit annoying. No offense meant to the Italian and Georgian flag, of course, but they do. And Jobava did resign. King h1, knight f1. And there is no way out. Knight to g3 checkmate is a threat that can't really be parried. Because if you try to parry it with bishop h4 covering this g3 square, you run. Heartbreak for Bahadur Jobava. Or not heartbreak, he just keeps entertaining us, playing spectacular games every day. But at the end he has not much to show for it. He has 1.5 points out of 10, if I'm not mistaken. Let's have a look. These are the standings and the comfortable lead, a whole point ahead. But even though he won 6 games in a row, it's still not a lock that he's winning the tournaments. There's still the 11th, 12th and 13th round to play, 3 rounds to play, and there is 2 players only 1 point behind him. So a lot can still happen, and it's gonna stay exciting while Bahadur Jobava is in out of 10, which is, I'm sure, pretty disappointing for him. However, we can only thank him for having provided a lot of entertainment during this tournament. Let's have a look, everybody but the number 1 and number 2 in the world, at the other results. We've seen Ivanchuk-Carlsen draw. Ding Liren against Wesley So was a very interesting theoretical draw for you students of chess theory. I highly recommend looking at it. Actually, Since this is live, I can do whatever I want. Let's have a Queen's Gambit declined, and they got a theoretical position. This is only for theory nerds, really. A quick update. Bishop e6. White went h4. Looks like a weird move, losing a pawn, but it's actually a time-honored classic introduced by former Russian world champion Mikhail Botvinnik. The funny thing is, there's tons of kind of common knowledge that you can't take this pawn because of queen to b3, and Black's problem is he can't comfortably defend b7 and h4 at the same time. At least that's what you're taught in school. Actually, yeah, I learned this as well at a young age, that you don't want to play this line because here Black has to make 3. That's what they say, but Wesley So, who's one of the best theoreticians out there, had a very close look at this position, came up with the move g5 here, which in my database I could only find one precedent. Nowadays in a theoretical line like this, it's nothing. And it ended in a very sharp, and a while later he got this position on the board without having spent any time, which happens to be a force move repetition after, let's say, king g2, queen e4 check, king g1, queen g4, and a draw. So that was Ding Liren against Wesley So. Ding Liren, by the way, also played a lot of decisive results. Let's have a look who else played today. Vasila Graf, who's also had a great tournament, played a draw against Radek Wojtaszek. Was a very theoretical game. Ivan Šarić has kind of lost his step over the last couple of games. He lost again to Anish Giri, our Dutch friend, whom I've played today. He won a very nice game with the black pieces. This is the final position. Black king is on f5, it's completely safe, but there is no escaping the black attack threatening queen c1 check, and the white king, which looks safer on b2, will actually be checkmated. So Šarić decided to resign here. Luke Van Velde next, if I'm informed correctly, which is always exciting because Luke Van Velde actually won his first game today against Ho Yifan, built some confidence. Very nice game by Luke today. And the other result we haven't mentioned yet is Timur Radjabov against Levan Aronian. That was a long theoretical martial attack, a line I know a bit about. I believe that was it with our recap from round number 10 and our first experiment of going live with some minor hiccups along the way. But it's been fun doing. Let me know if you guys liked it. I'm assuming this video is gonna make it to YouTube or to the new live there. Thanks a lot for watching, and stay tuned for the Wijk aan Zee tournament, which after a rest day resumes on Friday, I believe, with round number 11. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you next time around. I have no idea how to stop this broadcast actually, so I'm either gonna need the producer or we're gonna be sitting here watching me drink any buttons to make this stop. Not sure. Broadcast.